Welcome to the Real Leadership Edition of the Lead Out Loud podcast. I am Professor G, and today we are discussing, well, I'm not supposed to tell you what we're discussing because I'm going to give you a recap of the movie as soon as I get started and introduce my guests, and we're going to see if you are able to guess which movie it is. So put your trivia thinking caps on, pay attention, and let me know. Let me know in the comments if you were able to guess before I told you the name of the film. It's Real Leadership, and it's starting right now on the Lead Out Loud podcast. Welcome back to the Real Leadership edition of the Lead Out Loud podcast. I almost called it Distracted Driving. That was the previous version. I am Professor G, and I am joined once again by Kevinnovation. I didn't even use your real name on the last episode. I just called you Kevinnovation.
It's like the one name thing. That's all I'm going with these days.
I mean, is it like Kev is your first name now and Innovation's your last name? Or would you say Innovation is your middle name?
No, it's my entire name.
Okay, so it's all just together, like Madonna, Prince,
exactly.
Kevinnovation.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be transitioning to just a symbol at some point, but I'm not going to close the door.
Will you ever be the podcast guest formerly known as?
Sure, I'll go with that one too.
All right, well, we are back again to talk about another movie. And the movie, you know what? I'm not even going to say the name of the movie. I'm going to read the description here. Right. And then we'll have an unveiling. And so for those of you that maybe like to guess things, maybe you can try to figure out what movie I'm talking about based on
intrigue to get things going.
Right, exactly. So today we'll be discussing leadership through the lens of a satirical action comedy directed by Ben Stiller in 2008. There are several angles of leadership and team dynamics to explore here. The film stars Ben Stiller, Robert Downey Jr., Jack Black, and a remarkable supporting cast, including what I think might be considered a cameo by Tom Cruise. I'm not sure what the definition of a cameo is, if he's in it too much.
Maybe slightly bigger than a cameo. But
Maybe. It follows a group of prima donna actors who are making a Vietnam War movie, but their spoiled behavior leads the frustrated director to drop them into the middle of a jungle, hoping to capture their performances in a more authentic, survivalist setting.
Put them in the shit.
However, the actors end up in real danger without realizing it. I gotta tell you, I've never seen the movie Tropic Thunder before. It was a suggestion.
It hurts my soul a little bit.
It was a suggestion from my hosts last time. I got about 5 minutes into it, and I was like, what the actual...
You mean 5 seconds? The way it starts off?
5 minutes. Did I say seconds?
No, I'm saying, like, you could make that same... you could get to that same point within the first 5 seconds.
Well, actually... initially, I fast-forwarded through what turned out to be the first couple of minutes, because I'm going... So I watched it on, let's see, the streaming service was Paramount Plus, I think.
Oh, okay.
And, I can't keep up with all the streaming services, and, like, sometimes you have to watch commercials even though you're paying for it.
Right,
sometimes you don't. So I'm seeing all these trailers. And I'm thinking, at first I thought it was just okay, I guess I got to watch some trailers before the movie starts because it's Paramount Plus. And then I'm half paying attention, but I'm seeing enough of the trailer to go, that kind of looks like an older movie. Maybe they're like going, maybe this is the actual DVD version of the movie. And then once the movie starts and I start listening to them talk about some of the character names, a little light bulb, similar to this one on my hat, went off. And I said,
Damn.
Oh, I get it now. So...
Scorcher.
Satirical? a parody.
Yeah.
Lots of words we can use. The first thing I've decided is, normally I try to take a little bit more of a lead getting us kicked off. But on this one, I'm like, look, Kevin, ovation. This was, I think, your suggestion.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you start. Where would you like to start here?
Well, I think, this movie can be deemed today more offensive than ever. Right? And so I think it's important to start there and say that this is satire purely. Like, this is movie actors making a movie about how ridiculous movie actors can be. And there's some key lines in there that support that.
Which I have no problem with that, by the way. That's not what caused me to do the old what the fuck. I'll probably have to do some bleeping on this episode. It was the over-the-top gratuitousness of some of the first scenes where I'm like, how are we going to get to some leadership nuggets? Yeah. I got there, like, as I kept watching, of course, and then I'm like, okay, I got it. But yeah, when it first started, I'm going, whoa, it's interesting that we chose this.
So I guess where I was going with that is the fact that the movie itself, I think, demonstrates leadership, right? So Ben Stiller had, and I knew we were probably going to go here. So like, this is a very me thing, like this meta. So first of all, the movie itself is meta. It's a movie about a book about the Vietnam War, 8 of which had written books. 2 of, like, they go through the whole thing, right? But like the whole premise of it.
I LOL'd at that, actually.
It's a movie about a movie, right? About making a movie. So that, I think, is interesting on its own, like that construct of how you would create that movie. But then, like, Ben Stiller, Robert Downey Jr., no, this is all like Iron Man just coming out. So this is not Robert Downey Jr. today winning a Best Supporting Oscar a year ago, right? This is Robert Downey Jr. in 2008. He's working his way back into his career after a lot of struggles with addiction himself, which they cover in this movie, right? So there's like, I think there's some real leader, and then he's in blackface, right? He
kind of, I mean, depends on your definition, but the way they portray that in the movie is he's not in blackface. He like underwent
it's like
some kind of therapy to pigment his skin because
totally.
He's kind of batshit crazy, but
blackface in the sense that he is not genetically a black man and making himself to appear to be, right? It's not Al Jolson dancing around like with shoe polish on his face.
All right, but, let me. Can I pause you there for a second?
Yeah,
because I don't think when you said, well, this movie, I think you said in the beginning, this movie could be considered. Did you use the word offensive?
Yeah,
or you could make. I don't think so though. I thought that the way they told the story, well, I didn't think it was over the top. It made sense for what they were trying to do.
Well, so here's an example of what, like, just 2 or 3 years ago, right? Shaun White, the awesome snowboarder, skateboarder, ex-gamer, gold champion Olympian, wore a simple Jack costume to Halloween. And he got basically shut down as if he was making fun of the character is making fun of actors that go over the top playing a specific role. In that case, a mentally retarded individual, right? And so, like, there is a line in the movies like, never go full retard. So then it's talking about the absurdity of people going after roles to win an award. That's what that whole thing is about. It's not about trying to, like, shame individuals that have mental retardation or any other type of mental disability or learning disability or whatever it might be. And so that's where I think knowing that then, would this movie have been made today is kind of what I'm saying. Like, even though it was satirical then, obviously,
Yeah.
would it even have a place today to be made?
I understand what you're saying. It's kind of like, Blazing Saddles. I don't
Yeah.
know that
Yeah,
they
yeah.
could make Blazing Saddles today, but I also feel that Blazing Saddles is way more over the top, at least by today's standards, than this one was. Now, maybe in
Yeah.
10 years,
Fair
people will
enough.
be saying the same thing about this one,
Yeah.
which is an interesting conversation about, how do I say it? It's an interesting conversation and thought experiment about how our sensibilities change over time,
Yeah.
or maybe with current events, current situations. And I don't think there's a problem with the change so much as we need to not, though, convict past selves in a vacuum. You can't just
Yeah.
say, well, that was, oh my gosh, this is totally inappropriate and we have to cancel it.
Yeah.
And ignore what was happening at the time, or what was acceptable at the time, or else we're just going to, there's no learning then.
Well, and you could do that in big chunks of history also. Like,
For sure.
what society, the zeitgeist of the day changes, and, what the norms of individuals and populations change over time, right? So I agree, you can't judge at that time necessarily uniformly. You can't use the standards of today against that time necessarily.
Right. Yes, exactly. And then I think it's also wrong to then, well, I guess I'm really just saying what you said. It's frustrating when people pretend like all we've ever known is today,
Yeah.
and now we go and judge the whole of humanity based on what we know today, and
Yeah.
it's not fair, and I think it's very narrow. I also think that we need to get over ourselves in many cases. Are you familiar with rule number 6?
Not as it stands like that.
So the story goes, there's I've heard different versions of it, but the gist is the same. So there's a man, like a manager of a business, and he's sitting in his office and he's talking to a reporter, and somebody comes rushing in and they're all frantic and they've got this big problem out on the factory line, and they're like, oh my God, the sky is falling. And the manager listens, and then he stops him and he says, you need to remember rule number 6. And there's just this instant like change in demeanor. This calm comes over them, and they thank you, sir, and they walk out. So this happens like 2 or 3 more times until finally the person interviewing this guy goes, okay, that was amazing. I need to understand. So what is rule number 6? He says, oh, it's very simple. Stop taking yourself so damn seriously. And he goes, wow, what are the other rules? And he just looks at him and says, there are none. So this is everything that we kind of just went through. I feel like it needs a rules number 6 moment. Yeah. Are there some irreverent moments in this movie? For sure. Are they trying to be mean? No. Are they trying to be funny?
I would argue.
Absolutely. Are they trying to be self-deprecating? Yeah. So get over yourself and just appreciate that aspect of it.
Yeah.
So as I got farther into the movie, I realized that I was basically watching Three Amigos.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
So it's been a while since I watched Three Amigos. I remember loving it as a kid, but I would not be surprised if there are parallels.
I mean, so I'll give you the broad strokes. Maybe Three Amigos is definitely going to be on my list now. But the broad strokes is you've got these 3 actors from Hollywood that are having trouble getting work. And meanwhile, there's this village. I think it was I can't remember now. I think they're in like the area of Texas that used to be owned by Mexico. And so the village has been invaded by El Guapo, and he is coming in to rape and pillage and take over. And so they need help fighting back. So the three amigos get wind of this job because I think they get into a bar fight, if I remember correctly. And so somebody from the town sees them and they're like, oh my gosh, that was great. No, it's not a fight. They're acting. They're putting on a show. And they go, oh, we'd love for you to come to our village and help us. And so they think it's this gig, this acting gig. And they get there, and it turns out they're really in the shit. Just like in Tropic Thunder, where, they think that they're filming a movie, but the director now has actually dropped them in the middle of a jungle with live ammunition and real, explosives and landmines, and they're in the shit. And just like in Tropic Thunder and Three Amigos, there are some irreverent moments. Yeah. Of course, I got to make sure that I'm not getting my movies confused too. I won't quote. I'm not going to quote from Three Amigos because we'll probably do it later. And
all right.
I get Three Amigos and Blazing Saddles. Sometimes I conflate the quotes, but I know there's one where they go, oh look, it's a mail plane. How can you tell? Well, can't you see the little balls on it? Anyway, so back to Tropic Thunder. I mean, now that I've refreshed your memory on Three Amigos, we could probably go through and think of several other movies that are kind of in this same vein of being this parody about something else.
Totally. And it's like all the Naked Gun movies are parodies of old police. So they go back and take scenes from those movies, like in this Apocalypse Now, and so there is some homage. And in the director's cut, Ben Stiller has two different versions that he's a part of, one with the rest of the people that are making the movie, and then with the actors. I think the commentary on the actors side is the greatest commentary I've ever heard on a DVD. It is not something that I typically enjoy, and it's just like a whole nother free showing of the movie without going through every frame of the movie. Like, the guys are funny, they have a good rapport with each other. And then the number one reason why, again, from a meta perspective, is in the movie, Robert Downey Jr.'s character, Osiris, says, look, man, I don't drop character until I cut the DVD commentary. So the whole time he's doing the commentary, it's in the voice of Osiris. So it's just like, and then at the moment in the movie where he breaks character of Osiris, he then switches to that character. And if you recall in the movie, at that point, he is like stripping off all these old layers of characters that he's been through. And he's mirroring that in the commentary of the DVD. And it's just like, I don't know, like that kind of thing, like that commitment to stick with it. I really appreciate.
Okay, I want to dive into that, but first, I mean, yes, let's describe that for anybody who hasn't seen the movie, or it's been a while. So he's going through, Robert Downey Jr.'s character is going through this whole movie. He looks like a black man. He's supposedly undergone this pigmentation, so his skin is darker. He's got he's wearing a wig. Okay, so he looks like he looks like he's the other black character in the movie.
Right.
And then there's a moment towards the end where he goes, yeah, you know what? I'm not this guy. And he takes off the wig. He's got some facial hair. He pulls that off. It was fake too. He had something else, I think, on his head where he rips that off, and then he drops kind of the language parlance that he's been using. And he goes back to this Australian accent, which in the movie is where he's from. But of course, Robert Downey Jr., the actor, is not Australian. So here you have the actor who is still...
Exactly.
I appreciate the irony and the parody of that. Now, what I'd like to do is let's dive into that from the perspective of leadership,
Yeah.
because as I'm watching that character, well, you tell me, what are your thoughts? I'll let you start.
So I think even though, I guess the other dynamic, just to make sure that it's clear about the movie, is that Ben Stiller's character is playing the commander in the movie, right? But it's Robert Downey Jr.'s character that is actually being more of a leader and seeing things for what they are, and that they're not just in the scenes acting out a movie in this new guerrilla way, right? So there is a dynamic there where, on a person, like the person level, Robert Downey Jr.'s career is still thriving. Ben Stiller's character's not. He was top of the world action hero with this Scorcher series of movies. They played that out to death on Scorcher 8, The World is Frozen, or whatever the heck it's called.
Again.
Here we go again.
I think they go, here we go again.
Yeah, exactly. And then he does the Simple Jack movie where he like is going after it, like trying to get an award. Like that's why he's doing this role, over the top acting in this role, and basically his career comes to a screeching halt. He gets no work after that, and he's lucky enough to land this movie, but his career is like on the way down. So he's sinking fast. Robert Downey Jr.'s character is still on the rise. So there's that dynamic that's happening throughout the entirety of the movie. But then it comes full circle to about the scene that you were talking about, where he's stripping everything off, where actually he was still just playing a role that he was a leader, not actually being the leader, because he didn't confront his own insecurities and his own, he didn't have enough self-awareness of where he actually was as a person to authentically lead. And so there's that whole thing just shifts, and it's Ben Stiller's character who has had this isolation experience, that has had the time to think about it, and then opens up the eyes to Robert Downey Jr.'s character. So it's interesting how that shifts. It's like constantly morphing throughout the movie. And I would argue there's leadership to be had from every single character in the movie.
I think, yes. So yes, there are leadership examples. Most of them I think are bad. There's a few maybe morsels, especially towards perhaps the end. But I, particularly with, so Ben Stiller's character was Tug Speedman, right?
Yeah.
And then you have Kirk Lazarus.
Lazarus
is Robert Downey Jr.'s character.
Who's playing Osiris in the movie.
Who's playing, right.
Tropic Thunder.
Okay, but these two guys, so first of all, these two guys have a few things in common. One, neither one of them is, they've both got these facades. Okay, so neither one of them is being their authentic self.
Yep.
And both of them go through a little bit of a transformation, I guess, from the beginning until the end. In the case of Lazarus, so Robert Downey Jr.'s character, what I wanted to touch on, so he's taken all these masks off, literal and metaphorical.
Yep.
But it's supposed to be, I think, it is metaphorical, even though he's physically taking this stuff off. They're making this point, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching that. Again, we're supposed to be looking at it from a leadership perspective, and I'm thinking, well, shit, I've known a lot of leaders like that. It's actually rare though for them to be. It's rare for them to take it off intentionally. What usually happens is they say or do something that betrays their true self or their true motivations, and you get this little peek. What's the phrase? Your politics are showing. Your slip is showing. Their mask accidentally lifts off, and you go, "Oh my gosh!" Bill Shatner's wearing a hairpiece. I mean, I think it's funny. He's watching Star Trek, by the way, in one of the scenes. He's watching the original series, watching Kirk duke it out. But anyway, so that's kind of what I was struck by, particularly with the Robert Downey Jr. character. Is I thought, boy, what a great commentary on how things really are. And we talked in a prior episode, Brian and I were talking about Lucy and the Chocolate Factory, and, did the writers truly understand what it was like to work in a factory?
Right.
And they deliberately wrote that scene? Or did they write that scene just based on what they kind of knew about pop culture and stories about working, and it just was then even funnier because that's really how it is? In this case, I think they wrote this intentionally because the whole movie's a parody.
Yeah, I agree.
So now let's go to Speedman.
Yep.
And again, so the facade, the difference between these two, Speedman does not see the world the way it is. So this is another type of leadership trait that, no, it's not a leadership trait. This is another trait I've seen in people who are trying to lead and they don't do it well.
Yeah.
They perceive everything with their own version of reality.
Yep.
In this case, because he's insecure and he's trying to portray himself as something that he knows he's not. But I mean, they get dropped in the jungle, and the director's going through stuff, and the director steps on an actual landmine and blows up into a gazillion pieces. And Speedman is like, no, that was great. This is all part of the show. And he's holding the guy's head up. And he's like, look, it's just corn syrup and latex. And he's licking it. And he's like, wow, it's warm and doesn't taste like corn syrup. But man, wow.
He's able
that makes it even better, right?
Belief, right?
Yes. He doesn't go, oh shit, maybe I'm wrong. He goes, man, they're even better than I thought. I mean,
these are real thorough special effects.
I haven't seen that kind of delusion outside of politics in a while.
Yeah.
People that just refuse to see what's very clearly there. And that takes a certain amount of... okay, so there's insecurity there, which then they develop this ego, I think, to combat the insecurity. And then this ego, this alter ego, really is what takes over, and they become this other character.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. I do think, for some individuals, it becomes... It's not like they're putting on a mask. Like, it becomes... They believe that's who they are.
He believed it.
Right?
For sure.
And I think another example in that same kind of scene that you were talking about when they're first dropped off in the jungle, after the director goes goodbye, they're like in this gunfight, like real gunfight, right? And Robert Downey Jr.'s character pulls Ben Stiller's down to get him out because he's in real danger, but he doesn't think, he thinks it's all just like fake bullets and blanks. But then afterward, so those guys leave, right? Because by chance they set off a charge remotely from the special effects team, right? And so the people that were actually shooting real guns think that they're under fire now with a real grenade, but it turned out to be just coincidence, right? So then the Speedman grabs the walkie-talkie at the end, and the special effects guys are like, hey, you still down there? And he's like, see, this is the evidence that everything is just like I told you, right? So he finds this, he just got shot at with real bullets, but the evidence that he chooses to believe is the fact that this walkie-talkie didn't blow up with the director and confirmed his belief system, right?
What a great example. What a great example of my beliefs are the truth. The truth is obvious. The truth is based on real data, and the data I select are the real data.
Right.
Okay, I'm gonna use this little broken walkie-talkie that still is coming through with a signal as the evidence that all of this was staged.
Just as I told everybody, right?
He is Michael Scott.
Yeah, right.
He's Michael Scott.
Yeah.
Right? Michael Scott, and I don't want to go too deep into that because we'll probably do some Office episodes later too, but I mean, Michael Scott operates from the same facade. In fact, I wrote down, this is my term, not ChatGPT's or anybody else's. I wrote the facade leader.
Yeah.
They put on this facade, and they go and they say and they do these things because they believe these are the things they've heard people say. They don't understand why they get said, so they're just these vapid platitudes, which might be a redundancy. I'm not sure. If I look up the definition, I probably didn't need both of those words. But Michael Scott, right? He does that all the time. He goes and he does these ridiculous things based on his beliefs, and then occasionally, just like in Tropic Thunder, he gets lucky,
right?
And something works out. Like, hey, we threw this grenade and the explosion went off at the right time, so therefore it's all part of the show. And that was the whole show of The Office. Like Michael Scott just continuously getting lucky
stumbling
in spite
forward.
of his stumbling into the right decision.
Or maybe not even stumbling into the right decision all the time, but not truly paying the consequence for the decision that was made, right?
Oh my gosh, how many leaders do you and I both know? And we're using air quotes here. Okay.
Yeah.
These people,
positional authority.
I think we've both used the phrase fail upwards.
Yeah.
That's what that means.
Yeah.
You know, they are not competent, but they get lucky enough. They stumble into the right thing enough, and they manage to make themselves look good enough because of the facade.
Yep.
That somebody gets fooled, and they go, "Oh yeah, you know what? We're going to put you into a position of authority."
Yeah, and I think, without using specific names, you could see
just initials.
I won't even do that. You can see the scenarios on average in our time together in that company that we're talking about. I would say leaders, even at the VPGM or the senior executive level, are on basically 2-year assignments, right?
Yes.
So the first 6 months, you're figuring stuff out. Like maybe it's 3 months, but like at that level. But still, there's a chunk of time at the front end where you're not really expected to immediately transform the organization, right? Sometimes they don't want you to transform the organization. Sometimes they do. Like you got to read the cards. But in whatever kind of role that you're there, you really have a year to 18 months before they're starting to think about what your next assignment is going to be anyway. So you really have to F up bad in a year to then not be slated to go on to the next thing. And that's what I think part of the culture, like in that company, that allowed this failure upward to happen is, not exclusively, but a contributing factor, is that by the time the stuff actually hits the fan, they've already moved on, right? And there's another crew that's cleaning up the debris field behind.
That's exactly what I was going to point out is, the nice thing about that 2-year plan is even if you do make some mistakes, you're gone before those mistakes manifest themselves.
Yep.
And now it's the next guy's fault or next gal's fault. I mean, look, I'll use a name. I think that happened to Kevin McCallister. He comes in as the president of Boeing Commercial Airplanes and inherits a shitstorm. And all of a sudden he's gone. But the problems that occurred could not possibly have all been created in the short time that he was there.
Right. Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, what are they going to do? Fire me?
Slander.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that in the context of positional authority / what people are supposed to be as leaders, it gives a lot of room for error and to propagate these behaviors that ultimately catch up to people, right? And then I do think the higher up you go, the more accountable you are for more people, but in some ways it's harder to get rid of you, right? You have to really do something substantial in most of these established organizations to not have a soft place to land in or outside of the organization that you're in.
So let's talk a little bit about let's talk about that process. So because this is not unique to the one company we're talking about.
No,
I
not
guess
at all.
I've already said the name. So this is not unique to Boeing. It's not unique to Lockheed. It's not unique to aerospace.
You're talking about aerospace companies?
I see this. I see this in other companies. And here's what I see: that failing upwards. So I'm going to take a person who isn't necessarily qualified for the job, or hasn't demonstrated the level of competence that we would normally want. But I'm going to put them into this position because they're on a track, or that's just how we operate, or whatever it is. And so then now what happens is this person who may be insecure, they are forced to show this confidence. So they put up this facade.
Yep.
And then, and I had to go get some help remembering the name of this. Now the Dunning-Kruger effect
Okay, yeah.
is comes in. These people now think that they are better at their job than they actually are, because somebody said, "Hey, you know what? We're going to promote you into this position." Honest to God, I'm pretty convinced that in some cases they really are promoting people out of the way. You know, some directors like, man, I've got this senior manager. He's a pain in my ass, and he's not very good, and I just don't know what to do. So I'm going to recommend him for promotion, so at least he won't be working for me.
Yeah. Which I'll say in counter to that, not saying that doesn't happen, but in my experience, I felt as if the best leaders I had, which were, I only had, I would say, 3, maybe 4. I'll go 4. 4 total in all my years that I worked under, either direct report or chain of command, were the leaders not really great and authentic leaders.
Wait, first of all, I can tell the refrigerator in your room just went on again.
And I think that's an airplane or helicopter.
Oh, okay.
It's not.
So if there's background,
it's the movie. Look at all the action going on.
That must be it. That must be it. So if you hear background noise on Kevin's end, it's the movie, the Tropic Thunder movie that is playing in the background. Wait, say that again.
So what I was saying is, of all the leaders that I reported to, directly and indirectly, during my time there were only 4 at most that were not real leaders. Okay. In my parlance, okay. The point of that is, and in every one of them, I was mature enough by the time that I interfaced with them to know that I needed, I don't really like this term, but fire my own boss, right? I needed to move on. I was not going to be a good fit in that organization, and I had to take steps to remove myself from there. And that was the case with every poor leader that I had within the company.
Okay. You said a couple of things there. First of all, you fire your own boss. Okay. Because you weren't a good cultural fit. That's one of the 3 pieces of advice that I give to people all the time is you're trying to find a job. Your job is to find somewhere where you're going to be a good cultural fit, unless you literally just need a paycheck and you don't give a shit.
Yeah.
But if you are looking for a career move, you need to find a place where you're a good cultural fit, or else it's going to be short-lived, and you're going to come you're either going to come to the conclusion that you have to fire your own boss and move on, or you're going to think that it's your fault, or you're going to be struggling and frustrated because nothing that you're doing is having impact and influence. Yeah. I have a question.
What I would say is, it wasn't always just a cultural fit. Okay.
Okay.
One of them, I would say that's the case for sure. And that's being micromanaged. So that's a cultural fit. I am not going to operate well in that culture. Okay. I came into the company for years with a ton of autonomy. And then all of a sudden, everything, you're under a magnifying glass. You have to report in every 5 minutes. And it's like, this is I don't thrive in this environment. So I would 100% agree. That one, cultural fit. The next one, maybe it's considered cultural fit, but never was there a bigger delta between the way that the leader conducted themselves outwardly and the results that actually followed. or the actions that failed to walk the walk. Okay?
You're talking about
the talk was there, but
okay,
the walk the walk wasn't. Okay.
They're saying all the right things, but they don't deliver on any of their actions.
But it's not seen in practice, right? So I think maybe both of those could be considered cultural fit, but it's also just a lack of trust that happens then, right? And so that I think is deeper than just a lack of cultural fit.
Okay, let's double tap on that for a second. So I'm going to ask you this question first. When you think about the leaders that you've worked for, and you're thinking about, gee, maybe there were 4 that weren't great, or however you phrased it.
Yeah.
So tell me if you think this applies to all of them. Were they more interested in being liked than respected?
I don't think so. I think they thought the way that they were doing it is how respect was the resultant.
Okay, so they
I
were
demand
misguided.
respect because I'm checking over you every 5 minutes. Like, I demand for you to be okay with that, right?
Okay, so they didn't understand respect.
I think so.
So you're saying they wanted to be respected. They valued respect over being liked.
Yeah, it
but
wasn't
they didn't
just that
understand.
they wanted to be like in a glowing light all the time and like always be the shining star. I didn't really see too much of that.
Okay. I mean, this goes back to something else I say all the time, which is I'm not in the happiness business, and as I'm thinking through all the people I've worked for myself, I don't know that I could say, okay, all the bad ones wanted to be liked more than they wanted to be respected. I would say the bad ones did not have my respect.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean, though, necessarily that's what they were trying to be like. But I have worked with people that both, on a peer level and from a management perspective, that clearly wanted to be liked. And as a result, so now that is driving their decision making. It's almost like a politician who just goes and looks at the polls all the time, and that becomes their platform. If you don't have any values that you stand for, if you don't have any principles, when I talked to Dennis O'Donohue years ago, he said, an organization should have very few rules and a set of principles that govern it. In other words, don't be the micromanager like you're talking about. Yep. Don't tell everybody how and what to do.
Yep.
Hey, here are the principles that we operate by, and as long as what you're doing links back to that,
totally
great. And the people that want to be liked more than they want to be respected don't understand that. So they're constantly chasing a moving target, and they're in the happiness business, and that's not good for business. That's Michael Scott.
Yeah. And to that point, right, with our background in industrial engineering, statistical process control, right, where you're chasing every movement, every sawtooth that goes up and down, when if you just take a step back and look at the broader trend, you don't have to chase every one of those variations, right?
So my friend ChatGPT used in our conversation, which was really amusing, by the way. ChatGPT, I don't know if they made a change and an upgrade since the last time I used it, and it's been about 2 weeks. But the tone was just totally different this time.
Oh, interesting.
And very, very spot on with how I would want to converse. So machines are taking over.
That's interesting.
So ChatGPT and I were having a conversation about leadership in this movie, and
Sorry,
I like
conversation. Did you do verbal or was it just chat? Like
I was typing, and it was answering, and I was typing. Improvisational decision making.
Okay.
And they're talking about tug.
Yep.
So this behavior reflects low consciousness and poor use of evidence-based management, which is what you're talking about, I think.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not going to go and make decisions based on the facts, or if I am making decisions based on facts, I'm using the data I choose.
Exactly.
And so my worldview now is narrowed to the point where I don't see everything.
Yeah.
So I'm making a good decision based on this one piece of data, but there's 100 data points that I'm just ignoring. So you know what? We'll launch the space shuttle. I don't care.
Yeah. Right. I think, in our innovation work, we use this phrase with all the startups that go through our incubator and pre-accelerator program, and it's live in reality, not the convenience of fantasy. And so what that's saying is very on point to what we're talking about right now.
That's
It's not
tough.
to say don't be bold, don't have a vision for what the future can be. Only envision yourself in the today. That's not what it's saying. It's saying if you want to effectively achieve this bold vision you have, you really have to honor the realities that you have in front of you so that you can choose the right path or pathways to achieve that vision, that bold vision that you have, right? And if we just always live in the fantasy, like my idea is the greatest idea ever, I'm going to make $1 billion company out of this, and there's no evidence to back that up, you're not doing the hard work to go validate that your idea is worth anything, then you're probably not going to become a proud owner of a unicorn, right?
You use the V word, and we've both taught the same innovation class and had conversations about what we want the class to be and what we think they most need to know. It's validation. It's okay, you've got a bunch of assumptions. How can you now validate those assumptions?
Yeah.
And
or
that's
invalidate, right?
or
Validate or invalidate.
right. And that's the countermeasure to this idea of my beliefs are the truth is obvious, truth is based on real data, and the data I select are the real data. Okay,
Yeah.
Tug, you found a radio that works, and your belief now is that this is all staged and part of the movie plot,
Yep.
and there is no real danger, and you need to press on. Okay, so what are the specific assumptions that you've made that are leading you to that conclusion, and then how can they be tested?
Exactly.
How can we go make sure that is in fact true?
Yep.
I mean, there probably would have been shell casings from the real bullets that were being fired. There probably would have been some holes in some trees around them
Yeah.
that they could have gone and looked at. So, okay, what is your favorite leadership moment from this movie if you're not being meta about it?
So I think, yeah, just in a very like everyday Joe kind of way. I can't remember his name in the movie. Jake Baruchel is the name of the actor that plays him in the movie, but he's basically the kid from New York City, tall, skinny kid. He's the one that actually went through the boot camp to prepare for the movie. He's the one that actually knew how to read a map when everyone else was just playing the part, like they knew how to read a topographical map or trail map. And so it's at the end, he's like low man on the totem pole in the movie as a character, but also as an actor in the movie, right? He's just getting going with his career, and all these other giants are, have these franchise programs and massive awards behind them. And it's at the end that he basically, like when they're in the final scene, saving Tug Speedman from his character from the camp. He goes, "You guys are all," basically he says, like, "You guys are all absurd, like just nuts. Like, I'm done dealing with all of you. I'm getting out of here. I'm going to save my life." Like, and he's the one that demonstrated the most like leadership to know what to do when the stuff was going down, but maybe didn't have the leadership to communicate, "Hey guys, you need to listen to me. I'm one of the most equipped here for us to be able to survive this thing," right? So I think his leadership to finally step up at the end and overcome that insecurity to vocalize his leadership earlier really comes out at the end. And so I think that's a great example of everyday leadership, not positional authority. It is when it gets down to the end, who's the one that's making sure that they're all getting out of there safely? It's him, right? He's like,
So I think it's ironic that you couldn't remember his name because they couldn't remember his name in the movie
It's
either.
Sandusky.
Yeah, Kevin.
Kevin Sandusky.
It's Kevin,
Yeah,
and I think it was Tug Speedman kept getting it wrong, right?
But everybody does. Everyone does.
Yeah. Until the end, where he's like, "No, his name is Kevin."
Yeah.
Yeah,
You got my name right.
I thought I wrote it down, but I guess I didn't. At one point, maybe it's because it was getting towards the end of the movie, and I stopped writing things down. But I think he was really the only true leader depicted in the film that I would want to say good things about.
Yeah.
If I had to, we didn't really even mention, Rick Peck.
Yeah. The Pecker.
the Pecker, played by Matthew McConaughey, comes running out with the TiVo in the middle of the jungle. Like, he's just so talk about, again, just ignoring blatant clues.
Yeah.
He's just so focused on being that agent that's trying to get his client what he wants in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And then we didn't talk about Les Grossman either, the part played by Tom Cruise. He had a couple of amusing moments, but really,
sorry. And
no, go ahead.
One more with I'm totally blanking on names right now, but
I got him here.
Les Grossman's assistant. He's on location with them, and then he's back in LA, right? Presumably LA.
Yeah. Well, there's the scene when they've got the the T-Pain song playing, and they're dancing, and the guy's just like doubling down on everything that Tom Cruise's character says.
Yeah. Well, but before that, when he's on site, he's like, "Oh, I got your back. And then as soon as Tom Cruise's character comes on that video line, when they're doing after they blow up the scene and Les comes on and he just like rips them apart, right? Like right before that, he goes, "I got your back." And then as soon as his boss comes on, he's like, "Yeah, and don't ever do that again." Like, and just like two-faced just in a second. Completely, like the typical suck up, you know what I mean? Like,
gosh,
Bill Hader's character.
Yeah, Rob Slalom is his name. Studio executive Rob Slalom.
There we go. I didn't even remember that.
I have a cheat sheet from IMDb. We could probably do a whole nother hour on just those kind of auxiliary characters that we just named.
Yeah.
Which again, it's just going to be example after bad example of how not to be and what not to do.
Yeah.
They did a good job of, I think, taking all the stereotypes
mm-hmm.
and negative leadership attributes that you would have in industry, in a dysfunctional organization, and putting them into one movie, one storyline.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have a great example of leadership that stands out as my favorite, but I will bring this one up as mine, just for the sake of weaving it in here. We didn't talk about Four Leaf, played by Nick Nolte, who is the guy that...
Four Leafs. That's what someone called... I forget who called them. Four Leafs. That's funny.
No, it was... They might have called him Four Leafs, but then they also they referred to the Viet Congs.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And I think it was I might have been Kevin that was like, it's already plural. You don't need the S. So Four Leaf, going back to what you alluded to this in the beginning, and I'll get it wrong, but the gist of the joke was the same. The movie starts off with, this is a movie, or back in 19 whatever it was, 8 men went to Vietnam, and of them 4 came back. And of those 4, 3 wrote a book. And of those 3 books, 1 was made into a movie. And this is the story about making that movie.
Right.
So Four Leaf is the guy who wrote the movie. And he does not he has hooks for hands because allegedly he lost his hands in Vietnam.
Right.
And so we find out later in the film that not only does he have hands,
Right.
he never went to Vietnam. He was in the military, and he was in the Coast Guard as a sanitation guy
Yeah.
that took the trash out. He's like, I'm with a trash man. So here again, it's just like layer upon layer. So he lies
Yeah.
about his credentials to basically get a job, and even though the job was, hey, I'm going to write a book so I can sell the movie, but so he lies about his credentials.
Yeah.
And he's a total fraud.
Yep.
He's not. He's also playing a character.
Totally.
But the one thing I do like is that he did have a shift as soon as he realized, uh-oh, this doesn't seem right. Like he's watching from afar, and they're going, that's a lot of gunfire. That's an explosion that we didn't do. Where'd that come from?
Yeah, right.
Let's get on the radio, and then he doesn't get the readback that he's expecting, and he's going, well, that's kind of weird. They finally get to a point where they go, okay, we need to go check on these guys.
Yeah.
So they actually go after them to make sure they're okay, and then of course he gets exposed.
Right.
He gets captured. He gets exposed as not having hands, or as having hands, and then they end up trying to help save everybody, which I guess was a little bit of redemption.
So I guess, you bring up that whole, there's a great relationship between Four Leaf and Brian McBride's character. So Brian McBride's character, I think, does probably have some...
Cody.
Was it Cody? Yeah.
Yeah,
So Cody,
he was the explosives guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He has, I would argue, like, maybe persistently through the movie, some leadership that he demonstrates. You don't, at least you don't see these fatal flaws shared by many of the others. And maybe the biggest flaw that you see in him is the idolization of Four Leaf. He, in one point he goes, Tropic Thunder is my catcher in the rye. Like, not to sound weird or anything, but I like, he's like, so maybe that the if there is a shortcoming exposed of his character in this movie, it's kind of this idolization versus seeing somebody for who they are, right?
That's a great point. And as you're saying that, I'm realizing he's the only guy that is following a set of values. Now, you could argue that his values are, he's idolizing this guy that wrote the book, and maybe that's a little weird. And because, comparing it to The Catcher in the Rye, Catcher in the Rye is the book that supposedly all the assassins read. And he's the only guy with any competence, though, as well.
Yeah.
He knows what he's doing with all the explosive stuff.
Yeah, totally.
He actually
and he executes on his job, and
he has skills
yeah.
and competence, and he demonstrates those. And he's got I hate the expression, but he's got that true north. He has that set of values that he's following, and he does a good job of it. The rest of these guys, it's all a facade. They're pretending they don't really know. They're just chasing popularity. They want to be liked, whatever. Yeah, Danny McBride.
That dude's real funny too. So
Cody, I think it just became. He's in the running for my favorite character now.
All right, nice.
From a leadership perspective, I'm glad you brought that up. So, okay, what would you pull any of these guys aside and tell?
Oh my goodness, you got to go through every one of them. And I mean, if I was a manager, right, and this was my team, this is a tough team to do performance evaluation with. There's not a whole lot of overlap of the areas in which there's significant shortcomings, right? So if you're a manager, you're really going to earn your keep with this crew. So I think the challenge would be, how do you connect with each of them without burning yourself out? I mean, I don't think any of these are... This is a significant experience they have to go through in order to have these transformations, right? I think if you have this same collection of team members and you don't have that thing that really forces you to grind through and make that transformation happen, I still think most of them would be much more comfortable staying where they were at the beginning of the movie than having to become what they ultimately do at the end of the movie.
So you don't have any specific advice for anybody?
I would have specific advice for all of them. I'm just saying it would take a lot of energy to go through with each one of them in different ways. There's not one universal approach to go through.
Right? I mean, if I'm being consistent, I am probably going to pull Kevin Sandusky aside and tell him to go find another job because he's better than this.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, that's like Strengths Finder, right? Like, so find the person on your team. And we didn't really talk about this, but this was what I was saying, the difference between those 4 leaders that I didn't see this with necessarily, and the rest of them that I did, is they always encouraged me to take on new assignments to improve and be in a better position to lead, right? And so I think, to your point that you just made with Kevin Sandusky, is, yeah, go do something, like go be where you're going to be valued, and not in the shadows of others, right?
Yep, they won't even let him read. He's the only guy that knows how to read a map that went to boot camp. They won't even let him read it.
Yeah.
Which, again, a great metaphorical example. I'm probably using that wrong. My high school English teacher is going to yell at me if she's listening. So, okay, I'm going to...
So I will join you, and I'll say let's favor Danny McBride's character Cody and Kevin Sandusky, and help them shine better versus consuming all of our resources to try and bring the others along. Yeah,
and look, I mean, perhaps this is telling of our respective leadership styles. Maybe it's flawed, or maybe there's some real pearls of wisdom here, that this is what the 3rd or 4th movie where I am continuously going and saying, well, look, I'm going to pull the person aside that's exhibited some goodness and encourage them to go do great things, even if it means going somewhere else. Yeah. As opposed to investing all this time, effort, and energy into fixing some of these other flawed people.
Right.
Not that I don't think that there's room for that, but in the movies we've covered, you have to be judicious about the energy that you have. You cannot go and revitalize an entire team. Right. And be successful and have that kind of... Resources are limited. You don't have unlimited resources. So I'm going to bring up one last thing, and this is by way of a segue, because I have already chosen our next film. You and Brian have been cut off.
Fair enough.
No, I'm glad we did this one, because even though I think... So I know you've got your thing where you like to take cinema and innovate. You put two disparate things together and go, hey, what innovations can you get from these two things that don't seem to jive?
Yep.
And I kind of feel like that's what this movie did for us. This is definitely, if I had seen this before, this is not one that would have come top of mind. But I think we got a lot of mileage out of it and some good lessons and definitely some entertaining conversation.
Yeah.
And it has led me to this realization of this type of leadership in the vein of Michael Scott.
Yeah.
In the vein, you've got the Three Amigos, this idea of the parody, but let's go back to, so you've got the Tug, you've got the Michael Scott, you have the Buzz Lightyear. Same character, man.
Yeah.
Same character. Does not compete, does not take in reality.
I'm not a toy.
Right. I can fly. I can really fly. Yeah. And Woody's going, you didn't fly. You fell gracefully, or whatever the phrase is.
Yeah.
We're doing number 2. Toy Story 2 is next. Cool. And so set your, or subscribe to the YouTube channel, LOL. Let me get this right. Okay. The website is lolpodcast.net. I think I also have a .com version, but I don't remember what it is. So lolpodcast.net is shorter. That will take you to the website that has all of the episodes of this podcast on it, including the Real Leadership series. You can click to your podcast platform of choice from there. So we're on Spotify. We've got the Apple. We've got the other ones I'm not thinking of. iHeartRadio, I think, might still be a thing.
All right.
There's also, you can watch the podcast on the website, or you can click over to the YouTube channel and watch it there. If you like that, go hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. And then you can hit the little bell and get notified every time these come out. We're trying to do it once a week on Mondays. We skipped last week because I was busy. Sorry. What was the other thing? Oh, and then you can also listen on the website. There's the audio version there as well. If anybody thinks that we missed anything with Tropic Thunder, let us know. You can go leave a comment on the website. You can leave a comment on the YouTube. Kevin loves to be corrected. So...
Love it.
And we are going to do Toy Story 2 next week. And we'll see. We'll see who shows up for that one.
Cool.
So-
Jack Black. Just shout out to Jack Black. We didn't really talk about his character.
We didn't.
There's some real dark demons.
Lay off the drugs, Jack.
Yeah. So,
Jeff
huge
Portnoy.
Jack Black
Yeah.
fan, though. Love it.
I don't know what just happened to Kevin. But he has... He's disappeared. So yes, shout out to Jack Black. Hey, thank you all for watching and listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. Let us know what you'd like us to dissect next. Maybe you want to come on the show and help us dissect it. Shoot me an email.